Here's what we narrowed it all down to in this whole family series is just simply this. If you missed a week, this is what I would say is family is kind of like, how do you say it? I would say family's kind of like fudge. Mostly sweet with a few nuts. Okay? How many of you would agree? Yeah, there's a few nuts. I used to always talk about our Uncle Dennis. Every family has an Uncle Dennis, and we called him Dopey Dennis growing up. And that was all good until my wife goes, hey, I have an Uncle Dennis. And it was like, There's a reason. So I'm not saying anything about anybody named Dennis, but I'm just saying, man, families it's unique. It's a unique situation. And here's what we're going to talk about today is parenting. We're going to talk about parenting, and I've asked my wife to come up and correct everything that I've said wrong, and so she's going to help today. So, babe, why don't you come on up? I'll figure that thing out. Yeah, come on, give it up. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't work. You can have her sing. Yeah, it doesn't work. No, I'm just kidding. It does work. Hold tight to that. Here's what we're talking about in a sense. When it comes to parenting, listen, there's no perfect family. We've already established that. There's no perfect there's no perfect parent. Yours weren't, and you're not. There's no perfect kids. You weren't. And yours aren't. So we want to make sure that we establish that right off the bat. And here's what I'll say is, I don't know a whole lot. None of us came home with manuals when it came time to take our kids home. I remember when they said in the doctor's or in the hospital, they said when we had our firstborn, they said, hey, you guys are good to go. You guys get to go home. And I was like, now? Do you come with us? Like, I was a little nervous, and like it didn't have a manual, and I didn't know what to do. And yet we just kind of figured it out the best that we could. And so today, Shannon's going to help me. She's going to correct everything that I have said wrong in this whole series in the next few moments that we have. But we are excited. I know I did a whole lot of bad things. But we're going to talk about the 4 roles of parenting. And so, Shannon, why don't you kind of kick us off and get us in there?
Okay, so we are, first of all, before we get started, I just want to say that, John, you are probably one of the best people to be talking about parenting, because although I could correct many things that you don't do perfectly as your wife, I know all of your strengths and weaknesses. One of the things that I've seen you do so well is be a father. And anybody who knows you and knows just kind of the gentleness and the carefulness that you have with our boys and how intentional you are spending time with them, I would say that you are absolutely somebody who could get up and share about this. And I've learned a lot about being a more patient mother. I'm kind of task-oriented, so I want to keep the show rolling. And he's just so calm and patient with our boys. And so I've learned a lot just about how to be a better parent just from watching you. And that's truly, genuine, and
I
you
feel
do a great job. Okay.
I feel it, babe.
So I don't really have to correct anything that you've said wrong yet. So anyways, but today we're talking,
still young.
It's a young day, yes. So today we're going to be talking about the 4 stages of parenting. There are 4 specific stages that we see even Jesus in the gospel going through as he develops in his relationship with God the Father. And these are kind of models for us as parents. There are 4 kind of specific stages we walk through as our kids get older. So if you, whether you have a young baby in the house or a child that's out of the house, this applies, because every stage of parenting is equally important, and that's not a role that we lose just because of an age or a stage. It just kind of changes and morphs with our kids as they grow. So the 4 stages are the nursing stage, the king and queen stage, the coaching stage, and the friend stage. And the goal for all of us, and whatever stage we're at as parents, is that we want to be able to enjoy a lifelong friendship. Once our kids are out of the house and older, we want to have done these stages successfully so that we can have a lifelong friendship with our kids. That's the ultimate goal. And actually, we even see this type of relationship change between Jesus and God the Father, and even in our own spiritual walk with God. As we walk with God and our faith grows and develops, we grow from our infancy and knowing the Lord, and then continue to develop in our faith. As we continue to develop in our faith walk, we can go to the point where we can call God our friend. And the scriptures talk about in the book of John, Great name for a book.
Wow, come on, that was good.
Chapter 15, verses 14 through 15. The scripture says, "You are my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you slaves because a master doesn't confide in his slaves. Now you are my friends, since I have told you everything the Father has told me." So that's our ultimate goal with our relationship with Christ, is that we can call him a friend, and that we can, the scriptures say that the sheep know the voice of the shepherd. And so as we grow in our relationship with Christ, that we begin to know God's voice as a friend voice, somebody who speaks to us and gives us insight and gives us wisdom in our lives.
Yeah, if you look at the scripture verse, what's interesting about that is that Jesus, the Son of God, is inviting us, and he's saying, hey, listen, I have this friendship relationship with God the Father, and I want you to experience that. And so he's inviting us to have this ultimate goal, end goal, is that friendship, that we would don't take it as a part where like we have to jump through different phases to say, hey, we're just going to become, I'm just God's friend. Jesus, there used to be that old t-shirt that would say, Jesus is my homeboy. And I used to get so mad. I'm like, Jesus is not your homeboy. Okay, so just relax.
Funny though.
It is funny. It's great marketing. You know, I love the whole marketing aspect of it. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. However, there is this desire that God has to be friends of ours, that we would enjoy this friendship relationship with God. But there are moments where we've got to work through those things. And the Bible talks about working out your salvation. However, you can't just jump into a friendship relationship. You've got to move through the 4 stages to have this healthy relationship. And so, Shan, talk to us a little bit about the first stage that we have here.
Well, the first stage is that baby stage where we bring the baby home. This is called the nurse stage. This is my favorite stage, although we've only walked through 2 of the 4 with our kids because they're 5 and 9. But as adult kids, we walk through all these phases with our parents. And I will never forget, this is the stage where basically our only job as parents is just to love them, to nurture them, to pour life and love into them. That's really our biggest job, and to take care of their physical needs. Obviously, we have to feed them and change them and help them sleep and make sure they're getting all their physical needs taken care of. But really, before the age of 2 years old, there's nothing they can really learn. They're just being poured. Love is just being poured into them. And that's our job as parents, just to pour that love in unconditionally, consistently. And it is my favorite stage because I have a strong nurturing tendency.
Yes,
and
you do a great job with that.
Thank you. I blame my mom for that. She's like the ultimate nurturer. And actually, I'll never forget the first day we took our oldest son, Aiden, home from the hospital. Something about my personality is that if there's something new we're going to do or learn, I love to research it like crazy. So I'm pretty sure I read like 20 pregnancy and baby books before Aiden was born. We took tons of classes. I mean, there were some funny classes I made John take, like nursing, like how to, the father has to be supportive, so this is what the mother needs. And
You can do it, babe.
Oh.
You got this. Let's make sure he latches, okay? Here we go.
Yep. So, I'll never forget when the 60-year-old teacher lifted her shirt to kind of show something, and my husband almost died right there in the classroom. But but he did it because he loves me.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
So, we didn't really know.
You've seen them all, I guess. I don't know.
No, that's Sean. No. Oh, my gosh.
You want to correct that one yet? Am I there yet? I'm just wanting to give you stuff to correct.
That's my fault. I kind of opened the door on that one.
And I'll walk through.
I'm sorry. You did. I should know better.
No.
So,
I mean, so did she when she was kind of like.
Okay. Yep. So.
That was bad. That was bad.
It was really hard to keep him contained in that class. I was kicking him under the table.
Oh, there was a lot of kicking.
Don't you say a word.
You thought you were getting different kind of parenting rules from here. No. It's a lot of what not to do and what to do.
Yeah, there we go. So, but the first day that we took Aiden home, I didn't really have a ton of experience babysitting, and I didn't know a lot. So I read a lot of books. Now, I didn't realize there's all these opposing viewpoints about parenting out there. So I was reading like attachment parenting style books, and then I was reading like the opposite style. I don't even know what that's called, but detachment. I'm not sure, but I was so confused. Like, well, this book says you wake them up every hour, and this one says I just didn't know what to do. So the first night that we took Aiden home, I actually, and those of you who've had babies can laugh at this, I actually set not 1 but 2 alarms, and I put them underneath on our cell phones, 2 different alarm times underneath my pillow, because I wanted to make sure he didn't go more than 2 hours without feeding, because that was important, and that's what the book said. So I remember my mom being like, I don't think you're going to need alarms under your pillow. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm really tired. I'm not going to miss this. This is important for their growth that they eat. And my mom was like, I think he's going to be fine. You'll probably wake up. But yeah, so poor John had to kind of deal with me figuring out what we were going to do. And we didn't need the alarms. We didn't use any of the alarms.
He woke us up.
It was okay.
But we were so creative in a 900 square foot
yeah, we lived in a really small house in Chicago.
We had those mobile things, like you put one in their room, one in your room. Like in 900 square feet, like we wouldn't hear him.
We had like top of the line monitoring system, but you couldn't open the refrigerator door and the dishwasher at the same time. No. So I mean, we were okay, but
you never know.
Multiple systems to make sure that the baby was okay. And I really loved this stage. I loved the nurturing. I get that from my mother, so that was really fun and easy for me. My kids. The hard part for me was actually moving out of that stage, and we'll talk about that next stage in a minute. But the hardest part for me was like, I just want to always make you feel good and happy, and I just want to love on you, and I never want to see you sad. And that was hard to kind of transition out of that nursing stage, but we're getting there. They're 9 and 5. I'm almost there. So we see.
Asher's like, I'm not your baby.
And I'm like, but you are
That
my
might
baby.
be the time he's kind of like, I think we're done with this.
Yeah, it's true. He told me I embarrassed him the other day. So, but we see Mary doing this for Jesus in the book of Luke, chapter 2, verses 6 through 7. And it says, while they were there, the time came for the baby to be born. And she gave birth to her firstborn, a son. She wrapped him in cloths and placed him in a manger because there was no guest room available for them. So even Jesus, as we see his life kind of grow and change and watch his life play out through the Gospels, even Jesus needed that love and that care and that nurturing from a mother. And that's how he was, came into the world, was with that nurturing and that loving and caring. Although I also know, as much fun as this stage was, we can laugh about it now because our kids are 5 and 9, but it was really stressful too. Anybody with babies can understand that as much fun and as beautiful of a phase as it is, it's also probably one of the more stressful phases because there's so much constant need on the parents, constant provision and taken care of. So our encouragement in the church is that if you have somebody in your life that has that nurse stage baby at home, that small baby, do them a favor and offer to take their child and give them a little break, because you really are helping parents by giving them breaks at this stage, because it's fun and it's amazing, but it's a lot of work.
It is. I would say if you want, some kind of practice, you can always come to our house and just grab our 2 kids.
They're not in the nurse stage, though, honey.
But it's the greatest form of birth control right there. You come hang out, you'll be like, nah, we're good. We're not having kids. We have great kids, and even our security guard had to tell me that today. No, your kids are good. I know they sneak out all the time and steal Cokes out of the kitchen, but they're good kids. Thanks. Thanks. Here, let me just tell you, if you're in that stage, here's what I would say is, it gets better. It gets better. And I've heard that from parents, and we're kind of just right out of that a little bit. It gets better. It really does. And, the ultimate goal is to have this friendship relationship with your kids, and not a lot of parents have that with their kids. Maybe some of us here say, I have that with my parents. I really love my parents, and it's a great relationship that we have. Man, that's awesome. And then here's the deal. Like, if you're beyond that stage and you're past that stage and you're like, yeah, we don't have the babies and all that stuff, man, find somebody in the church, unless you're weird, but just find somebody in the church and just be like, hey, how can I help? How can I babysit? And some people would just be like, are you kidding me? Absolutely, you can help me in this, and this would be great. And so I just want to encourage you to do that. Let me just also say this. You have to learn, as the parents, we have to learn how to move through these stages for the sake of our kids, but also for the sake of ourselves. If we want to have that friendship relationship, we can't keep keeping our kids back here in the nursing stage. And this is what I would say, is if you're still nursing your kid at 16, man, that's not good.
No judgment zone, John.
Huh?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, no, I didn't mean like that nursing. I meant like the nurse stage. I didn't mean that. I meant like if, the nurse stage, if your kid's 16 and you're still treating them like they are an infant, that's not good. Wow, pulled out of
There you
that
go,
one
there
real
you go.
quick. Okay, here's what we know is parenting is hard. It's not easy. It's not easy. Each kid can be different, and each kid's going to progress through these stages differently and at different times. And so, how do you know when to transition from one stage to the next? Because as Shannon talked about, that first stage is that nurse stage where you're comforting and you're nurturing and you're loving and you do all these things. And Shannon, you're awesome with that. You still, even with me, you nurture me so greatly, and I love it. And then she's like, "Oh, baby," I'm like, "Yeah." And even when she did up here, was nurturing, like, "You're the best at this." I'm like, "I am. Tell me." She's the oldest, I'm the youngest, and so it's like, I need that. I'm like, "Oh, no, please stop. Don't. You don't have to say all those things. Tell me more." But when do you transition from that nurse stage into what is the next stage, which is the king-queen stage? So king and queen, when do you transition between that? Here's what I would say. This is just me. I'm not a psychologist. I don't have all the degrees. I don't have any of this stuff. This is just my experience. Here's what I would say is when your kids learn how to say one simple word, no. When they learn how to say no, this is that moment we now need to transition into nurture and care. "You're so cute. That's awesome." No, hold on. And this is a stage where you establish, look here, I am the king of this house, and your mother is the queen of this house, and we need to establish the rules of the kingdom here. And we need to make sure that listen, and this is a famous line I say with my kids, "Oh, some reason you thought I was asking you. I'm not asking, I'm telling. I don't want to clean up my room." "Oh, that's okay. We didn't want to," and I'll say something, probably inappropriate. And I'm like, "Well, we didn't want to have you." No, I'm just kidding. We didn't say that. And I'm like, "Well, we didn't want to pay taxes, and we didn't want to pay off the mortgage, and we didn't want to do that, and we didn't feel like cooking for you and cleaning for you, and we didn't feel like buying clothes for you. But we did it anyway. So I'm telling you to go and clean up your room." "Okay. And don't ever in this kingdom say no to me again." Do you understand me? No. So we establish that, and it's in this stage now. You move on through the stages, and you have to establish, who is the king, who is the queen? Because here's what I know. It's in the stage that kids are designed. They are naturally designed. I don't know by who, but they are designed to divide and conquer in the stage. Dad said no, but I'm going to go and ask Mom. How many have experienced that one before?
I am the weakest link.
Yes. Mom said it was okay. What? I just said it wasn't okay. But Mom said, happy wife.
Happy life.
There you go. So this is where you exert leadership. In the king-queen stage, you exert leadership, direction, guidance. Dad's the king, Mom's the queen. And so, Shan, talk a little bit about this, because you're in the stage, you do really well at this. You have a healthy balance of it. Talk to us a little bit about it.
Well, this has been harder for me because my nurturing side kind of does not like making them have to follow rules and boundaries. I feel a little bit guilty or bad, just putting those down. I've had to actually really read the scriptures, and it's not that we're being mean or anything. It's just I just don't like to see them feel sad. It's very hard for me. So I've had to really look to the scriptures about what we need to do to help our kids go through this next stage where they're learning boundaries. And it says in the book of Proverbs in chapter 29, verses 14 through 15, is that if a king judges the poor fairly, his throne will last forever. To discipline a child produces wisdom. His mother is disgraced by an undisciplined child. And all I can think of in that last scripture is bad Target runs. But the mother is disgraced by an undisciplined child. It's happened.
Hey, but that's not the mother's fault. That's Target's fault.
I'm saying, yeah, it is Target's
because
fault.
They put all the candy and gum right at the register when you are done after you said no a million times.
My gosh.
And they're like, but, and you're like, could you touch that thing one more time? I need to see this magazine, what's happening with Angelina Jolie or somebody, Brad Pitt. I don't even know if they're together anymore. But
no, honey.
Okay.
But
I'm relevant. That was lit.
No, honey. No. Wow. Okay, so the word discipline actually means exercising authority appropriately. So we're not talking about abusive discipline or yelling or screaming. That's not the kind of discipline that even the scriptures are talking about. We're talking about giving guidelines, boundaries, expectations, even allowing natural consequences for behavior to sink in, and that's really hard for me too, because you just want to jump in and save the day. In fact, like a week ago, our 9-year-old told us a story about a very mean child in his class that kicked him out of the engineering group and tripped him. And I was really upset about it for a few minutes. And when we were going, I was for a while, I was like, I want to know a name. I want to know where he sits in the lunchroom, and I will be there Monday, buddy. Don't worry about it. I got this. And John was like, don't tell her the name. Just don't. Well, here's how you handle that, buddy. But
Take a chair.
no, so it's hard to give them those boundaries and how you handle things and not jump in and save the day, or to allow, even if, who knows if in that situation he was doing something that deserved to be kicked out of the engineering club. So just teaching, probably not, but
not our kid. Totally
just,
the other kid's fault.
Just allowing the natural consequences of bad decisions to sink in and to let them learn from them is an important part of their development. And Dr. Gary Smalley, if you haven't heard of him, he has great books on parenting and marriage. In his book, The Keys to Your Child's Heart, he says, children need a sense of discipline and authority in their lives to help them develop emotionally and physically. It gives children a sense of security to know what their boundaries are. So I've had to kind of mentally prep myself that it's okay to give the boundaries. It's okay for them to cry, and it's okay for them to feel uncomfortable, because that's how they're growing and that's how they're developing. And it is healthy discipline to allow them to develop emotionally and physically and give them that sense of security. So those boundaries help kids to grow. They need them. And if you don't give your kids a sense of discipline and authority, what you end up doing is raising entitled young adults. And without discipline, children are underdeveloped emotionally, physically. They lose some of that sense of security. And they're likely to still be living at home when they're 40. So you don't want to miss this key point as a parent, because they really need it to be able to go out into the world and be successful.
Yeah, I would just say, let's show the front half of that quote real quick, and you'll notice what it says. Children need a sense of discipline and authority. And I know there's different rules. People are like, we don't tell our kids no, and you have your reasons, and I get that, and that's one side, and then there's another side. It's like, we don't discipline our kids, we don't do any of those things. But here's what, this is a psychologist, so don't get mad at me, okay? A psychologist is saying that children need a sense of discipline and authority. Again, discipline, we're not saying abuse, we're saying just guidelines and boundaries. But then watch what it says, because it helps them develop emotionally and physically, and it gives them a sense of security. Now, if you take this whole thing in this, I'll be quiet after this for a minute, but not long. But here's what I would say is, we always label this generation, it's the millennial, the entitled generation, the entitled millennial generation. But here's what's happening. Parents, we need to take some ownership of this, because if we don't make the corrections now with our kids 9 and 5, this is what it's going to be, if not even worse, because simply what happens is we didn't give them just some guidelines and some boundaries and disciplines and kind of walk them through that, because that's on us. So what happens is they become underdeveloped emotionally and physically, and they lack a sense of security in their life. All because why? We didn't give them that boundary. And I know, like, everybody's all into free-range chickens and, like, let's free-range our kids.
I like it. I like the free-range parenting.
Yeah. That's all good. Yeah, I know. Let them run. Oh, watch out for the car. That's all good, until something happens, until somebody's eye gets poked out. It's too soon?
Wow.
Too soon. That wasn't even notes. That came straight off the cuff, which will get me in trouble. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, we'll tell you later. My wife in a Nerf gun to the eye, and it wasn't good.
Be very careful with Nerf guns, Moms.
Yeah. When you look down, and it happens. But so here's the whole point of that is, kids need that. They need discipline. They need guidelines. They need boundaries in there. And so I just wanted to chime in on that one.
Yeah, I like the, in Proverbs chapter 19, verse 19, it says, discipline your children while you still have the chance, because you can't do it when they're older. It's too late. Indulging them destroys them. So, sometimes in our culture, we really celebrate indulgence in every kind of area. If it feels good, do it. If you want to have, that second, whether it's food or whether it's sexually or whatever it may be, it's all types of different things. Consuming, just buying. We have a very indulgent society. And so what we have to realize is just letting our kids do whatever they want whenever they feel like it is not helping them. It is destroying them from the inside. They need those boundaries.
Yeah, and it doesn't set up that respect in the end. I did a wedding this summer for a couple, and I sat with the mother and father of the bride, and I just watched their interaction with their two kids, their two adult kids, and I just kind of, in a sense, admired it. I was like, wow, this is like really cool. Like, you're kind of like their friend. And so we started talking, and that's exactly what he said. He said, in this stage, it's so fun because we're friends now. We build into each other. And I'm like, yes, so much so that I called him this week, and I messaged the daughter, and I said, hey, is there any way that, maybe I could reach out to your dad? And here's what I'm talking about this Sunday. And I just wanted to ask some questions. And really, he talked about this very thing on discipline. And again, you have to understand, discipline is just setting boundaries within your kids. And he said, listen, the way that we got to this place where we're friends with our kids and we love each other and we build into each other's lives and we have fun together is and I'm going to kind of condense our conversation to two things that I really got out of it. Number one is just simply boundaries. They set boundaries and parameters, and they let their kids know very quickly when things were on and when things were off, when things were right and when things were wrong. And he said, man, we didn't let things go for a long time. We just simply, when it happened, we addressed it, and we made sure, hey, that's not okay. This is okay. This is what we do. And so now from the other perspective, as I'm messaging and saying, okay, how is that for you as the daughter? How is that for you? And it's like, you know what? My parents raised us to know the difference between right and wrong. And we knew that. And so then they began to start trusting us to make our own decisions. Because they taught this is the hard work. This is the king queen stage is the hard stage. This is where you're establishing authority. You're trying to make sure everything, but you're setting those boundaries. You're doing the things that aren't always comfortable and always easy. And it's easier to skip this stage and go straight to friends. You're going to be my buddy all the time, and we're gonna. Shannon tells our kids when they were little, when in the nurse stage, I can't say nursing stage, in the nurse stage, you're gonna have a house next door.
Mommy's gonna pick your spouse, and you're gonna live right next door to her,
yeah.
right? And yes, mommy, I will. I know it's terrible. I'm just kidding.
What was it he would say? So if he made it into the pros, he would.
Oh yeah, if our oldest made it into the pros, he was gonna buy me a hotel with a pool.
And I was gonna get a massage.
He was gonna get a massage.
I'm like, that's awesome. One massage. Mom gets a whole hotel with a pool. I love it. So you're establishing these rules. You're establishing all these things. And then here's the second thing. Tom Lundeen was his name. And Tom just said, here's the other part, is we had fun. We had fun. It wasn't always just like, hey, this is what you do. You can't do this, don't do that, do this, don't. He's like, we had fun. We played games together. We played board games together. He has a son who's into boating, and he has a daughter who was into cheerleading. And we started talking about that, and he was like, that's a whole thing in itself, where he's like, I played hockey. Cheerleaders took up space on the bus. We didn't like cheerleaders. And then my daughter goes, I want to be a cheerleader. He's like, are you kidding me? And so here's this dad who's like this hockey player, and he's like, having to figure out how to do cheerleading competitions. And so he's like, but we made sure that we had fun in what they were doing. I didn't have to enjoy what they did. I had to enjoy them. And it was having that fun. And those are the things that built into this lifelong relationship that they have. And now here's where we start to move out of that. And remember, you can't just skip the stage because it's hard. And let me just say, I know some of you are like, we're not even parents. Trust me, we're helping. Take some notes, and maybe there's some of you who say, we want to be parents. Listen, that was Shannon and I's story where we couldn't have kids, and God did a great miracle in our life. And so there's all these. The good news is that today we can make some changes no matter what stage we're in. We can make some changes. And so here's the third stage right here. You'll see this up on the screen. So there's nurse, there's the king, queen, and then here it is. The third one is the coach stage. And this is where you're beginning to train them and encourage them and kind of walk beside them and kind of help. I would say this stage is more along the teenage years. This is kind of in those teenage years. And moving in and out of these two stages is kind of like an art form because you have to move towards this coaching stage with them, but then backing up into the king and queen stage. And this is one of those things that the dad that I spoke to, Tom, was saying, there were moments where we would kind of let the rope out a little bit and let them go, and then we'd have to kind of pull it back. And then we'd let it out a little bit, and we'd have to pull it back. And so you're coaching them and to go out, and then you're also bringing them back in. And as they come back in, now you're beginning to kind of walk them through. Hey, here's some guy. Hey, I want to kind of talk to you about this. And in other words, as a coach, you're on the sidelines cheering on the kids, but you're not necessarily on the field playing. This is now where it's a different ball game, and now we're out of Shannon and I's element. We're out of, as she said, we have a 9-year-old and a 5-year-old, so we're just guessing at this point. No, I'm just kidding. We did a lot of research. We read some books and listened to just different psychologists who talk about this. And then even some of our years of youth ministry kind of play into this. And this is what I would say is Aiden has a coach that coaches him in football. And I think he is absolutely one of the best coaches I've ever seen in all my life, in all my years of playing sports. This guy is amazing at it. His name's Lance, and so we call him Coach Lance. And he was part of Aiden's baseball. And then he was like, hey, does Aiden play football? I was like, no, he's never played football. And so much so where, like, we like this guy so much. So I said, man, we've got to get him. And this is the guy I want to kind of coach Aiden and kind of walk him through. Here's what makes Coach Lance so good is that, he's great with the kids. He gets down on his knee, talks to them on their level. He's a great encourager. And so when he's on the sidelines at the football game, here's what he does is he's cheering those kids on because he can't play. He's cheering the kids on. Come on, that's good. Hey, come on, you could do better. Hey, make sure you watch the right side. Hey, closing that gap. Get over here. This is awesome. Great job, guys. Come on, let's work harder. Hey, let's communicate. And he's cheering them on from the sidelines. Now, in between plays, when offense and defense transitions out, he brings one of them over. If it's defense, he brings them over and he goes, okay, guys, how's it going? And it's awesome to watch because he literally gets down on his knee and he speaks to them on their level. And he goes, how's it going? How's everybody doing? Okay, hey, what's going on the right side? We're getting double teamed over there. So you didn't see that on the left side. Here's what we're going to have to do. We're going to have to kind of come together. I'm going to need you to come up. And he's giving them this whole thing from the sideline. And then you know what he does? He sends them back out to do what? Fail. It gives them an opportunity to fail. Sometimes they do a great job with it. Hey, come on, that's awesome, guys. Great job, way to go. Hey, we'll get them next time. Remember what we just talked about? Close that gap. We're going to close it this way, not that way. That's opening. This is closing. Close the gap. Close the gap. Okay, when the guy has the ball, that's the guy you hit, not your guy. Not your guy. Don't do that. Oh, okay. So he's coaching them from the sidelines. And then when they come in, parents, here it is, watch this. Then when they come back home, now all of a sudden you speak to them on their level. Not the nurse stage, not the king-queen stage. This is so pivotal right here because this is what makes or breaks that ultimate goal, which is that friendship level. Because if you're coming, what is wrong with you? Are you kidding me? How stupid are you to be doing that? And now you're breaking their spirit. You're coming down on them. They don't even want to play, or ultimately they don't want to be your friend. And then because in the end, the friendship is because they respect you, not because they feared you.
And if I could jump in, when we were in youth ministry,
I'm just kidding.
When we were in youth
I was
ministry,
on a roll.
you were. But when we
Go
were
ahead.
in youth ministry, we don't have teenagers ourselves, but we had a really great opportunity to watch teenagers and the way their parents were parenting them and the long-term effects that it had. And if you don't move out of the king and queen stage and you try to control them at a high level when they're in those teenage years, I can tell you they were very well behaved in church, but when they left the church, they never looked back, and they often never looked back to their parents because there was just no transitioning from that king and queen stage to the coaching stage. So you do have to give them free rein to fail, and actually they're made to make mistakes at that age. They're really developmentally wired to learn from the mistakes they made. And I'll never forget a youth pastor friend of ours where the parents were just so upset that their kids were making bad choices at their teenage and young adult years, and he said, well, that's how they're wired to be. That's what their brains tell them to do right now. Their brains are not fully developed. This is how their brains develop. So being afraid or trying to control that your kids will never make mistakes and stay in that king and queen phase, it does have a detrimental impact on them when they're adults. And a lot of those kids that we would see, they were the strictest parents, and their kids were at every church thing, and their kids did everything right in front of them, but then later on, they wanted nothing to do with those parents. So it is really important that we take that leap of faith into that coach stage.
Yeah, so you're coaching them from the sidelines because you can't get in there and play their game. You can't play the teenage life anymore. And, and you'll hear it sometimes, even in this culture, you'll hear people, I'm going to be my kid's best friends. We're going to be best friends. And it's like, they don't need you to be their best friend. That's number one. Number two, your time to relive your high school years is not through your kids. They need you to be a coach. They need you to kind of mentor them and disciple them and kind of guide them and lead them and walk through life with them. And so from that coaching standpoint, it's almost as if you have that higher advantage where Coach Lance can see what's happening on the right side. He can see what's happening. He can see where it's coming in. And so he brings them in and he gives them from a coaching perspective. And that's where you got to be able to sit down with your kids and be able to coach them and go, hey, what are you seeing? Parents, let me just say this. If you have a parent of a teenager or you know at some point you're going to be there, here's the greatest thing that you can do in this stage. Ask questions. Ask questions. Even in the king and queen stage, ask questions. Here's what you're actually doing. You're helping them to develop psychologically and develop inside their mind and their emotions to be able to process what they're feeling. Hey, talk to me. Why did you do that? I do that with our night. Hey, why did you hit your brother? Okay, just in case you're like, oh, those kids are great. Yeah, great. Why'd you hit your brother? I don't know. I just wanted to. Well, that's not okay. That's not okay. So we're going to have to talk about that. We're going to have consequences. But what you're doing is you're helping them develop that by coaching them along. And now you're guiding them. And this is what I would just say is you're setting up their future. It's okay for them to fail. Watch this. It's okay for you to fail. I'm going to bring you back in. I'm going to comfort you. I'm going to guide. You can always come back in, and I'm going to help you through that. And here's what I'm going to do as a coach. I'm going to send you back out, and they're going to go out, and you're going to give them the tools they need to succeed. That's your goal. I'm going to give you the tools you need to succeed, and then at times when you're going to fail, listen, I'm right here. And when you succeed, I'm cheering you on louder than anybody else. You're going to hear my voice. I'm so proud of you. I am pumped for you. Way to go. That's awesome. That's amazing. And when you fail, we're going to bring you back in, and we're going to, hey, what did we do? Hey, maybe from this side, because I've been in those shoes before. This is what I would encourage you to do. And you send them back out. Cheer on their success. Coach them through their failures. Send them back out. Bring them back in. Send them back out. And can I tell you what you're doing is you're actually letting them know it's okay to go out. You can come back for coaching, not for residency. You can't live here. You can go back out. But what if I fail? Oh, bummer. Dad's going to be right here to cheer you on, buddy. But I'm 40. Bummer. You're not living here when you're 40. But we're going to send them out. And Bible talks about this. It says it right here in 1 Thessalonians chapter 2. It says this, and you know that we treated each of you as fathers treat his own children. We pleaded with you. We encouraged you. We urged you to live your lives in a way that God would consider worthy, for he called you to share in his kingdom and glory. This is where we're now sharing with them. And that's a coach. That's exactly what a coach does. A coach is urging. A parent is urging them. You're pleading with them. You're encouraging them. That's that coaching stage. And once they begin to move through that, what both Tom and Aspen said was, now I begin to have this respect. Now this was fun. And now I enjoy going back to my parents. I enjoy spending time with my parents. I enjoy this season. And that's what ultimately our goal is to have this friendship with our kids. This is where what Tom said, now we build into each other. There's this mutual give and take, and it's fun. Shane, talk to us a little bit about that, because I notice that's one of the great things that you and your mom have is just such a great bond, a great friendship. And so talk about that for 30 seconds.
Okay. Well,
I'm
yeah.
just kidding.
I'll go quickly. It is the goal that we want to have. Is that I'm so thankful that now that I have my own kids, we can enjoy relationship with our parents and we can have fun with them. We can go on vacations and do neat things together, and there's a great bond, and we've built that relationship, and. That is our ultimate goal, and that's a healthy relationship when your kids are adults. It's not the starting point, it's where you work to and to get through. And sometimes I know as parents, I mean, I told my mother as a teenager, I said mean things to my mom when I was a teenager. And
she's right here if you
there.
wanna forgive
Yeah,
her.
she can attest to that. But
you wanna ask
if
for
ever
forgiveness.
I had the curse of the comeback. And so if I ever got in trouble, I knew really mean things to say. So I would say, well, you'll never see your grandkids one day. I would just think of the meanest thing I could say. And I know at the time she probably thought, my gosh, I'm raising the most terrible person. But and so some of you in that stage where your kids aren't into the friend stage and you might feel discouraged or like, whoa, how could we ever be friends? We can barely stand in the same room and get along. You keep doing these things and you can get there. And if you want to have that lifelong friendship with your kids when they're older, you have to honor these different phases. And I want to recognize too that sometimes when we talk about that friendship phase with our parents as adults, it can be painful. I know that a lot of people have broken relationships with their parents as adults, and that is a really painful thing. But I want to encourage you that God cares so much about people. He says in the Psalms in chapter 68, verse 5, that he is a father to the fatherless and a defender of the widows. This is God whose dwelling is holy. God has so much compassion. If you feel a little bit alone or like you have that disconnect from a family, God is the father to the fatherless, and he's here with you right now. If you don't have that picture-perfect relationship, you can have it with God the Father, and that's the beautiful thing. He talks in the scripture so much about caring for those who feel isolated, who feel abandoned, who feel alone, the orphan, the widow. So if you feel like that's where you're at right now, lean into your relationship with God, because he is a loving father. He is a gentle father. He is an encouraging father, and he will be there for you.
Yeah, that's good. I'm gonna have the worship team come on up as we close out. My folks growing up, what I would say is probably like many of yours, they did the best they could with what they had. And I always joke, my dad's father stabbed his own son with a fork. So my dad never stabbed me, so I think we're doing pretty good. So that's we're doing well. But he did the best that he could with what he had. And as he was kind of working through his own, both my parents were working through their own, and they kind of moved us from New Jersey down to North Carolina, and kind of just a new start, kind of get things going. And somewhere along the road, I really began to see my dad change. I saw this transition take place in his life where he moved from trying to figure things out to this great dad. And what I would say is it was when God truly got a hold of his heart, not just knowing what to do and the right things to do, but there were two factors that played into this. And Shannon and I were processing even this week, and I was like, you know what? This is what I think really took place from a kind of a little bit of a removed place. What I saw in my dad was that he experienced God as we're talking about. He experienced God in this nurse stage where he allowed God for the first time to kind of nurture him, to kind of guide him, and to kind of lead him, and just kind of care for him, to let him know, like, hey, I'm with you always to the end of the age. And this is what it feels like to be fathered by the greatest dad, God the Father. And then ultimately, God became my dad's authority. Whatever he did, it was because this is what was not just right, but this is what God's word says. And now all of a sudden, I remember those years where now I remember watching my dad just now reading the Bible. It wasn't now reading the paper and watching sports. Now I was watching my dad read the Bible. And things began to shift in our home because now all of a sudden, he's beginning to guide us through the word of God. And everything became that God's word was authoritative, and God gets the final word in his life. And I've watched God become a coach in my dad's life. And he coached my dad through multiple things, tragedies, cancer, watched him coach my dad through retirement. What are we going to do? And my dad just all on his own decided, I'm going to start a ministry. I'm like, what? What's that going to look like? He's like, I'm just going to go to nursing homes and pray with people because they need it. And I was like, okay, you're going to do that through the church? I don't know. And he didn't wait for somebody to give him a green light. He just felt like this is what God called him to do. And now my dad has like a rotation where he sneaks in Snickers and candy and Cokes to people because they love it. And he prays with people. And it's interesting. He walks through some great things where people are like, oh, you're my nephew. And he's like, and he goes along with it for him. Yep, absolutely. I'm your nephew. And he prays with him and he talks to him about Jesus. And he kind of just, he allowed God to coach him through that. That's not something my dad would have ever done. But he allowed God to coach him. And it's now that my dad enjoys a friendship with God. Here's what that tells me is that God can take you through what maybe your parents couldn't pull off. And I'm so glad that my dad had two things that really played into it. Number one was a church. Concord First Assembly in Concord, North Carolina. Just kind of guided him. Yeah. You feel that calling, go for it. And the second thing that I saw really make a change in my dad's life was when he started allowing people to kind of come into his life. When he started allowing other people where we were very closed off. We not a lot of people ever spent the night at our house. We never spent the night at people's house. We didn't go. My parents didn't go out to eat and hang out with people. They just didn't do that. But there was a process. There was a moment where all that started to change. And when that happened, there was a change in his life. There was a change in my mom's life. There was a change that took place because now people were helping them grow in their faith, helping them grow in their marriage, helping them grow in raising kids, helping them grow through processes and changes and phases of parenting. And that's why we're doing our whole community group and saying, man, this is what we want to be able to happen for you is get a part of a group. Let it change your life because this is what changed the trajectory of our family. Is when my dad, men hear me real quick because this is for all of us, but men hear me. It's when my dad began to step up to the plate and he began to allow God to be God in his life. And it changed him, but it changed us as well. Would you take a moment, close your eyes, and bow your heads?